Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing.
Why?
Yeah, but you shouldn't be protesting the A. Protesting the A means that you are surrendering our freedom of speech.
So you're limiting our freedom of speech.
You are limiting. No, I'm saying everybody. Everybody should have their opportunity to speak here. Whether it's an A, whether it's a menorah, whether it's a nativity. And standing in front of this is giving it more power than it deserves.
That's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do.
Hello YouTube, this is Lomaxient making a video response to Essence of Thought and his video called Christian Seeks to Silence Atheist Freedom of Speech, Bill Kelly. And it's obviously a video that I disagreed with. I don't often disagree with Essence of Thought, but on this occasion I think he done fucked up, so I'm gonna tell him why.
Greetings and welcome there people of YouTube and to you as well, Lomaxient. This is going to be a usual style video response following the basic format. I'm still not at university, hence no video. Let's get straight into it.
In fact, I did tell him why. I wrote him a comment, but it was like 190 lines long, and he just went, fuck that, too long to read. And I was like, fair enough, and he said, turn it into a video, and then I'll respond to that. And so, here I am, making a video.
I must inject here that on my end I received the comment at 20 to 2 in the morning of New Year's Day, having just got in from celebrating. I did however go back and explain to him in full why I didn't read the whole comment, as the first few objections I did read were a repeat of what I discussed repeatedly, sometimes with 3 different people at once. Therefore I said a video response would best suit me as I can deal with it once and for all, but otherwise good so far.
So let's begin.
Now what the guy on the left is actually doing is practically going that it's my freedom of speech just to yell over you as you talk and you can't do anything about it. That's not how freedom of speech works.
No, that's actually pretty much exactly how freedom of speech works in a nutshell. In the US, freedom of speech is simply the letter of the law and human rights that can't be abridged by the government. Provided there is no imminent threat of violence or danger, the people can do exactly what they like. It sounds like you totally misunderstand what freedom of speech means in American law.
Well, yes and no. I stated in my comment to you that you have to look at a number of planes of free speech. The two who were talking were very much using the colloquial sense of free speech of their own actions in censoring one another and not in the law's definition. So I took it as this on their level in my response at this point. This was possibly not the best thing to do when I would be switching to the legal sense straight after, and I admit that it could have been better to acknowledge this, but this was an unscripted piece, save reading out the signs. If one side merely, makes extreme noises in a debate to silence the opposition, that is not freedom of speech. Just like it is not freedom of speech to block out, a display which they have a permit for, to block out a display set up by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That is in no way freedom of speech.
Wrong. That is in every way freedom of speech. Blocking signs, shouting over people and being assholes are all totally irrelevant. The First Amendment is about the limitations of the powers of Congress, not the people. How you choose to express yourself is only limited by health and safety concerns and nudity. In addition to what's laid down by the Constitution, the Supreme Court established the imminent lawless action test. As far as I'm aware, this is one of the only rulings that defines any limits of freedom of expression concerning speech specifically. Here's a quote from Wikipedia. Under the imminent lawless action test, speech is not protected by the First Amendment if the speaker intends to incite a violation of the law that is both imminent and likely. Now, it could be argued that particularly controversial speeches will incite a violation of the law, and the intention that fueled the speech is too vague to be determined. To get around this ambiguity, the US came up with the notion of free speech zones. Basically, you get a permit to set up your free speech zone for a few hours, and officers will ensure your protection for that period. You can say whatever vile, bigoted things you like, and the officers will protect you. They will police this temporary line in the sand, and if any protester crosses that line, he or she is in breach of the law. They use these to make the decisions about who's guilty very black and white, the protesters or the protested. It doesn't matter what you say in your free speech zone. If a protester enters it, they're guilty. They create free speech zones to make absolutely sure the First Amendment isn't undermined by the imminent lawless action test. Now, they're not perfect, because protesters get arrested by incompetent security and they don't know why. You could have a whole separate debate about the pros and cons of free speech zones. Nevertheless, free speech zones are there for a reason, and that is to protect people's First Amendment rights.
Okay, well, I have several points. Firstly, I use the example specifically of an organised debate and the case of a display with a permit, so the Iran-Ra thing doesn't align, especially when he's going up against people with a microphone. Secondly, you have introduced me to the second level of free speech that I discussed most frequently in my video, and that is the form of legal contract between the local government to allow an individual or group to have their voice heard. Remember, this display has a permit to be just that, displayed. The permit acts as a legal contract between the local government and the organisation to ensure that the local politicians uphold the agreement of the Constitution, and could be argued to be on the same lines as the freedom of speech zones, but for the display. What this means is that by the protesters blocking out the signs, they are breaching this. This can be seen here where Bill Kelly is standing, and when Mr. Left takes over, he does move to the side, but later on is told to shift over for no apparent reasons other than, I suspect, to block out the sign once again. I suggested repeatedly in the comments below my video that a protester would be standing to the side to allow access to the display or standing across from the display, not in blocking it, thus breaching the local government's contract through police inaction to honour the display permit. But here I am at a loss, for this is merely my moral opinion, and I need to be clear in that I believe that morality is subjective when I'm saying that, so I don't mean you're immoral, but that I believe that this is wrong on a moral basis, even if your laws do not cover it. Therefore, I concede on the point of legal technicality, but still stand by my view of this as wrong, and in failure to act in telling the protesters to merely take a couple of steps sideways, they are in effect ensuring one group is silenced. Long story short, it would have been better for me to have just referred to it as censorship, and made from there the argument that it was breaching of freedom of speech via a legal loophole.
And God is wanting this campus to repent of their wicked ways, turn, forsake sin, come to the mercy seat of God, be reconciled to God through Jesus Christ. God cares about you, students. God cares about you, students. He's not willing that any perish, but that all come to repentance.
Hey, ma'am. Ma'am.
Yes. Sir, go ahead.
If you're trying to spread the good word, maybe you shouldn't be telling everybody that they're sinners, and maybe you shouldn't be yelling at everyone, okay?
He has everybody go through his. She does not. She doesn't pay shit.
Get your hands off of me right now.
That's nice and consistent.
Please get your hands off of me.
You can't do that shit.
Just obey the orders of an officer.
This is the one causing. Huh? I'm okay. I just. I signed up to be here this week. I will be here tomorrow. I will be here Monday, Tuesday, unless there is a rapture. Now, a rapture is when God calls away His church.
Now, the reason all this jibber-jabber about free speech zones is important is because you said...
Let's go back to the case earlier this year when a campus preacher got a permit to yell hellfire and rhetoric at students, One of the students yelled back, and for that he was arrested and assaulted by police. Of course, you're a Christian, that's not going to happen to you.
You see, this bit really pissed me off because it's a total distortion of the events. That permit she got was for a free speech zone, and the student, Montalvo, entered that zone. The security guard stopped Montalvo and told him that he wasn't allowed into the free speech zone. He tried to barge past. They spent time reasoning with him and explained that he would be arrested if he continued to disobey their authority. He then got pinned, he resisted, and the struggle escalated to a degree. Mace was sprayed at one point, but he sustained no real injuries to his body or eyes. He wasn't assaulted. That's how they do it in the US. He fucked with a free speech zone and got served for it. Angela Cummings is a grade A cunt, but it has no bearing on the legitimacy of Montalvo's arrest. And the reason why it bugs me so much is because I hate it when people distort the truth. Now, in fairness, my description of the events in my comment wasn't quite accurate either, so we can all share in the blame of trusting shoddy news outlets now and again. You seemed really selective about the details you shared though, to such a degree that I got suspicious enough to fact check the details because I could swear you were omitting something, and lo and behold I was right. Anyway, these two protests are not analogous at all.
Now this is slightly ironic on the part that you yourself have deliberately left out a vital part on this. But first, something you couldn't have known, so it's not your fault. None of this video was scripted. I only had the signs and what they said prior, when normally I make notes to give a more detailed analysis. However, I went back and checked what I said, and the case, and I found I left out parts in my video. So I overlaid text explaining this, in how he had also crossed into the designated zone, and that I was not making the point to agree with him, but merely show a double standard in repercussion. Nothing happened, to my knowledge, to the people carrying the banner. To reiterate again, just telling them to step to one side to allow access to the display would have been enough for me, just as Montalvo was warned by police. I also make clear that I saw his actions as wrong. This all starts at 6 minutes and 20 seconds in my original video, for those who wish to verify the truthfulness of my statement.
Right, okay, you also said...
Then set up a petition. Go to the officers in control. That's the way you should do it. The correct way. Not just randomly, spontaneously start protesting, you know. They had a permit to be there.
But you say nothing about how Montalvo should have followed the proper channels. You exhibit a shocking double standard here, and it's really fucking sad to watch.
You mean the way that I said his actions were wrong, and you left this fact out. I'm not doing this to be mean, and please nobody harass him for it. I conceded the legality for my first part, and his criticism is very much welcome. However, I also need to be clear in what I did say.
These Christians probably did go through the proper channels, and when those channels failed them, they protested. This is how and why almost every organised public protest in history comes about. Unlike Montalvo's protest, there seems to be nothing random or spontaneous about this, unless you consider all public protests to be random and spontaneous, in which case you're sticking your middle finger up to all of these protesters.
Then set up a petition. Go to the officers in control. That's the way you should do it. The correct way.
People have the right to protest publicly. Who are you to tell them how they should or shouldn't protest within the constraints of the law?
But again, that was never the point of my video. My point was, and always has been, about the censorship of the opposition.
You're a whisker away from telling people where they should stand, when they should stand there, what they should wear and hold, and what iconography they should adorn themselves with in a free access public area. Within the constraints of the law, we can only hope to convince others that they are betraying their own principles or persuade them to adopt new principles.
At this point you make it sound as if I wanted them arrested, when that was not the goal of my video. I just wanted them to allow access to the original display, which was contracted by permit to be displayed by the local government under the Establishment Clause. And what I mean in that sense is that because other groups can display, they can display also.
You have no authority to tell people what is the correct way to protest. But perhaps this was just a moral statement you were making, an argument about decency and tact. See, I think it was a tacky, classless protest. Then again, I think the Freedom from Religion Foundation display was pretty tacky as well. If you want to make an argument that these protesters are behaving without decency by maliciously silencing a group of people without provocation, you might win a point. But the Freedom from Religion Foundation are in the business of provocation. The guys that make the Freedom from Religion displays aren't timid, closeted atheists. They're total piss takers.
At this point, you sounded exactly like Bill Kelly. The display was not set up to attack religion and didn't even mention Christianity anywhere. What it did say was that there are other non-religious individuals out there, so don't feel alone and isolated if you are a closeted atheist at Christmas. Neither of the signs or the banners contains any sign of hate speech. So what are you on about?
I certainly don't think that the Freedom from Religion Foundation's billboards can be considered hate speech, but they're definitely pointed towards Christianity. Just look at them.
Christ and Christianity are not mentioned in either text. The only reference to religion is with the word religion.
They're obviously designed to imitate biblical verses in stained glass windows, Christian symbology in short. You're kidding yourself if you think the Freedom from Religion Foundation don't intentionally stir up controversy and thrive off it. All I'm saying is, if the Freedom from Religion Foundation are going to take the piss out of religion, how can you be shocked or appalled when people take the piss back? This is a null argument and I do not see why you are making it. I was only talking about the banners and the signs on the display. Nowhere did I mention the organisation as a whole, and neither did Bill Kelly. Both of us were clearly only discussing the display in question. So what relevance at all do any other banners have to do with this? I can understand criticism, but this is going from criticism to, well, it's just not a very valid point. And it's foolish to make an argument that it's just indecent to cover up signs across the board regardless of provocation, because if you did that, you'd have to drop your support for the bikers that use the Stars and Stripes to block the Westboro Baptist Church signs from the view of the families of dead soldiers at those soldiers' funerals, lest you wish to be accused of holding to double standards. Except on the fallacy of your analogy, specifically being that you have the points and forces all wrong, and let me explain why. The display is being protested, just as the funeral is being protested. The banner carriers are attempting to censor this display, just as the Westboro Baptist Church are attempting to hassle the funerals. And the bikers are in fact doing what I believe the police should have been doing in this case. The Westboro Baptist Church's message can still be heard, and that's why we have so many of their videos online. However, their protest does not have the right to stop or cause trouble to the funeral in any way, just as Bill Kelly has no right to block the display. This is the one main failings I've seen in the comments on my video. They fail to actually link rationally each part to its counterpart. I believe the police should have told the protesters to step to one side so we could see the original message and that they did not actually breach the contract they had with the local government. That did not happen. They are equatable with the bikers, ensuring that the Westboro Baptist Church does not hassle or stop the funeral. Do you see that? Nobody was complaining then, and I personally applauded those bikers. It was the epitome of decency, in my opinion. I did as well, and I hate the fact that the police did not intervene to ensure that the display was still accessible to the public, ensuring the stability of their contract, thus having sound freedom of speech. You also ask, so you conclude that blocking out a display is somehow positive? How do you come to that conclusion? in exactly the same way as the bikers came to their conclusion. I don't think these messages are remotely on par, but you asked for the psychology behind it and well, that's pretty much it. They're censoring what they feel is an obnoxious message, however misguided that feeling may be. That's the rationale anyway. I don't know whether or not I believe that that's their true motivation.
And I have already explained the failings of said analogy. The Westboro Baptist Church was not censored, but the bikers ensured that they could not interfere with the funeral workings itself, just as the police should have done with the display. I like to call this hijacking of a poor analogy and fixing it to turn it back on you.
What's more is the Freedom from Religion Foundation clearly encouraged these protests. It's a publicity stunt after all. American media of all stripes are very good at manipulating people's outrage. There's nothing like a good protest to emphasise your message. They know this. This is their game plan. They want the attention, they want to make religious nuts look stupid, and they want their argument to be brought to the public. Job done.
Why don't we just remove all displays at Christmas, whether they be nativity scenes, or atheist or solstice displays? Simple solution, no one gets hurt.
Fuck. It's simple if you utterly undermine the First Amendment. It's simple in a vacuum perhaps. Not so simple in a world where many atheists enjoy Santa and Christmas trees, and the lines of what constitutes religious iconography has become increasingly blurred. Is a Christmas tree a religious symbol? I think you were just being sarcastic offering up this option, but if so, you still undermine your own point. If it's absurd to prohibit the displays, it's also absurd to prohibit the protests. Your option B is...
we can either have that, or everyone has the ability to have their constitutional rights at this time of year.
Ugh. People's constitutional rights are precisely the thing you're arguing against here.
Except for the fact that you have failed to give a single example of this up to this point. I have conceded on a legal loophole, but I have in no way done what you have just said. If you don't supply evidence pretty quickly, then your point can just be dismissed without evidence.
Nobody is having their constitutional rights violated by this protest. You may not agree with how far people can stretch freedom of expression rights in the US, but if you don't respect the first, you're playing with fire, because the amount of atheistic arguments that stand on the first is overwhelming. It's such a valuable law given America's current social and political climate. Fucking with the First Amendment isn't a good idea. You're in danger of opening up a Pandora's box of freedom of speech issues the moment you put a qualifier on it, no matter how reasonable it may seem. Now, I don't actually like arguments based on the Constitution, but this is a legal argument. I don't like the dogmatic adherence to the Constitution that many people so often seem to exhibit. I hope there comes a day when American society is matured enough to the point where this all-or-nothing approach is forgotten. But for now, shit is tense, and that document is an absolute bastion against corruption. It's too fragile, and it's too precious to allow people to mess with it.
I dealt with this on the whole basis of legal contract with the state, i.e. the permit to display and police inaction to ensure the upholding of this, just as with the freedom of speech zones. Oh, that is such irony, considering that the banner of the display goes on about how the winter solstice was once a pagan tradition, and that's the real reason for the season.
If you like irony, then check this out. The same amendment that these protesters probably tried and failed to breach with their petition is the amendment that guaranteed their right to petition and also ensured that that petition wouldn't pass. The amendment that gets people like Montalvo arrested is the same amendment that forces idiots like Angela Cummings to preach from their petty free speech zones and keeps crazies like that out of government legislation. It's the same amendment that ensures that the FFRF can display their banners and the same amendment that ensures protesters can block those displays. It's the same amendment that lets the WBC preach hate and bigotry, whilst bikers can block those displays and fill people with admiration and hope. You see, you have influence, 1,000 plus subs, 200 plus approval rating on your video. Nowhere in that video do you explicitly state that you wish to prohibit the people that protested from protesting in the way that they protested. But regardless of whether or not you meant to send that message, I'm certain that at least some will receive it that way. You've encouraged people to think people should be prohibited from their First Amendment rights, whether you meant to or not. The real irony is, whilst you admirably praise this concept of free speech, the words you use to do so are absolutely toxic towards arguably the most all-encompassing piece of free speech legislation ever written, the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States.
Your actions speak louder than your words, so if you want to say that you stick by the First Amendment, act on it. Don't just say it.
Again, you can't tell people how and when they're allowed to protest. Well, you can, but there's no reason for anyone to listen to you. You see, you have influence. 1,000 plus subs, 200 plus approval rating on your video. Well, you can, but there's no reason for anyone to listen to you. You see, you have influence. 1,000 plus subs, 200 plus approval rating on your video. Well, you can, but there's no reason for anyone to listen to you. In America, if you don't want people to block your signs, it's your obligation to take measures to ensure that those signs can't be blocked. For example, pick a site where you can set up a free speech zone around it, or just put your sign on a pole. That would have done the trick here. Now that would pretty much be it, but you wrote in a comment to me concerning this video, which I'll quote here. I would suggest looking at freedom of speech on all levels, both legal and colloquial, as both play a role in my video. Now, I'll be honest, this sounds like a dodge to me. It sounds like you're trying to gain room to wander into some abstract philosophical concept of what freedom of speech means to you, and wriggle out of defending some of the pretty conclusive statements you've made. I really hope you don't do that.
I really hope I haven't gone out and done this in how I've defended 2 of the 3 levels already, and I'm about to defend the 3rd, which is the macro scale, i.e. the whole idea of what the whole protest was about, and the reason for the title, Christian seeks to silence atheist freedom of speech. You see, I'm expanding them to defend more points. I'm not expanding them to then run and hide in just one of them, which is a subjective one. So we'll go further onto the 3rd one.
So do you really have any problems with their putting an A up?
Actually, I kind of do, and I'll tell you what. I think that Rahm Emanuel was really wrong to grant this permit. I don't think that. I think that if you actually read the text of the atheist display, it's actually more hate speech. It's really not adding anything to the Christmas spirit. It's not really even telling anybody who they really are, or what they really want, believe, or what they want for society. They're just saying that they don't like Christianity. Personally, I think that that's hate speech.
So that was the clip I just played from the original video I responded to, and I hope you now see the reason for the title, the macro perspective. The entire reason for the process is to try and force government not to allow this in future, due to Kelly viewing the local government's actions as wrong and the apparent signs as hate speech. He is, in effect, seeking to silence atheist freedom of speech at this season.
I really don't know what you mean by the colloquial usage of freedom of speech. I only understand it as a political right, and I've never heard anyone talk about it in any other sense. Maybe I could grant that the protesters weren't acting in accord with the American spirit that respects each other's right to freedom of expression, and the display was not nearly provocative enough to warrant their tactics. I share the opinion that they were indeed being douchebags. That being said, given the phrasing of your statements where you reference the Constitution, arrests, officers in control, petitions, permits, and how freedom of speech works, I can't believe you weren't referring to people's legal rights in these points.
Constitutional rights protected under the law. Constitutional rights. Constitutional rights, the government. Petition, the officers in control. Permit, arrested, police. Correct systems, legally. Bill of Rights, government. Government, First Amendment rights. That's not how freedom of speech works.
For most of this video, all you've really said is this particular protest is distasteful. You don't agree with the method, but then again, you presented distorted information, exhibited double standards, misinterpreted the First Amendment, which shows a lack of research or investment, or worse, purposely misrepresented it to support a fallacious argument. In doing those things, I think you've betrayed your own principles.
which is why I try to help you in saying that you need to look at multiple levels, and I hope I have explained each one of them. The colloquial dealt with the spirit, like you said, with the two people, i.e. Mr. Left and Cool Christian Woman, and their personal usage of it. Then I also had an issue with the double standard in police inaction, i.e. reaching the display contract, which I'd argue to be on the same levels as the freedom of speech zones you talked about. Lastly, the reasons for the title was Kelly's goal in this protest, and the reasons for it, the macro scale of things. I will concede that this was not my finest piece of work, especially in the wording, and the way that I switched between the levels of freedom of speech, which was not the smartest thing to do, and I did not address it. But again, it was all an unscripted piece, and I had attempted to correct my perceived mistake in the overlaying text or the comments below. However, I do take issue with the way that you have lied at certain points about what I have said, quote mined for irrelevance, and made fallacious analogies when in fact it only serves to better my position as a whole for the basis of them moving slightly to one side so people could still access the display, but they could not censor it.
So that's the grilling. Take it or leave it, fight back, kill me, send subscribers to rape me. I don't know. Do what you like, Taram.
If you want to say that you stick by the First Amendment, act on it. Don't just say it. So yes, that was the end of the video, and please, again, do not go harsh on him. The criticism was made in a well-intentioned form, but was found wanting in a number of areas. The video will be linked below, but above all else, keep it civil in the comments, both mine and his, or do me a favour and please unsubscribe. So yes, this is Essence of Thought, feeling much better for having explained myself in clarity in a video. Out.